Hello there my Jedi and Sith friends, my Mandalorians, my Megalorians, and I think I see a couple of Tusken Raiders joining us. I'm not too sure how they got in, but please do keep the noise down. But hello one and all and welcome to another Star Wars video. It is I coming at you once again, your friend and your favourite galactic hostess, Star Wars Meg, and today we're going to be diving into some pretty fascinating Star Wars lore. For many years, Star Wars fans have wondered where the Skywalker family name comes from, and I'm not talking about out of universe. In fact, the explanation of how George Lucas went from calling him Luke Starkiller to Luke Skywalker is pretty well documented. For one, he felt that Starkiller evoked the wrong kinds of emotions. He thought it was too menacing for the galaxy's new hope, and you can kind of see his point. And second of all, the original name was also dropped to avoid negative real-world associations with Charles Manson, but we're not going to talk about that today. But where it concerns in-universe, there have been a plethora of theories to explain how the Skywalkers got their name, and in 2019, we finally got our first real clue. In Thrawn Treason, the final installment of Timothy Zahn's canon Imperial trilogy, we learn about an important job title within the Chiss Ascendancy, which harkens back thousands of years. Those who occupied this role were called Skywalkers, with a dash separating the sky from the walker, but Skywalkers nonetheless. These were Force-sensitive Chiss navigators who helped the Ascendancy in their native regions of space. Skywalkers were typically young girls and women taken away from their birth families from a young age, and considered to belong to no one family during their service, and they were part of what was known as the Skywalker Corps. Pretty fitting. However, once they were done with their service, many Chiss ruling families were eager to adopt them, but it should be noted, many Skywalkers never returned from their service. Among those that did, a few would become caregivers to new generations of Skywalkers. And what made Skywalkers so special is they had strong Force premonition. They used what the Chiss called the third sight to navigate through difficult territories of Chiss space. Indeed, these gifted young girls significantly shorten the duration of journeys thanks to their precognition. But here's what's really interesting. Most, if not all, eventually lose their ability to tap into the Force, and their third sight becomes diminished. There are many theories as to why. Some say it's biological, whereas others say it's due to the changing mental state after they become part of Chiss society. They're no longer tapping into the Force, they're no longer training, and so they lose their abilities, the same way anyone would, regardless of their species. But when it was thought that Skywalkers were losing their gift, they would be tested within the Ascendancy. A rare ability that only some Skywalkers had was a form of telepathy, which the Chiss called the second sight. But generally, Skywalkers were very well respected. Officers and warriors held them dear, and did not take kindly to diplomats who disparaged their navigational skills. In particular, Chiss pilots worked very closely with them. But now, here's the big question. Are these Skywalkers in any way connected to the family name Skywalker? Well, one theory states that just like here on Earth, last names might be reflective of job titles from ancestors, the roles they played in their respective times and societies. And while it seems unlikely, maybe a human Skywalker was once working for the Chiss. Even though the Ascendancy is very selective and they're pretty much always Chiss, there might have been one exception, and the first one that comes to mind is the earliest Skywalker we can track, and that of course is none other than Shmi Skywalker, Anakin's mum. And interestingly enough, Shmi fits numerous criteria to have once been a Skywalker herself, and we'll come on to Timothy Zahn's own words on the situation in just a minute. The most fascinating thing about Shmi is that she's quite a mysterious Star Wars character. We don't know where she was born or where she's from. All we know is that at some point, she ended up as a slave, working for Gardrula the Hutt and then Watto. And we also know that both she and Anakin are not originally from Tatooine. That's right, Anakin might have grown up on Tatooine, but he's not originally from the desert planet, which is stated in The Phantom Menace itself. And it's very possible that before she ended up a slave for the Hutts, she was working with the Chiss. But I won't say she was their slave, because the Chiss outlawed slavery. It wasn't allowed for moral and practical reasons. They believed that slaves were bad workers, so Shmi only became a slave after arriving on Tatooine. So maybe Shmi was recruited for a strong third sight before giving birth to Anakin, or maybe after the Chiss found out she was pregnant, even if she retained her abilities, the Chiss ejected her from her position. Now you might be wondering, why in the world would the Chiss hire a human Skywalker? Well, it turns out Chiss Space has a planet with Force-sensitive human colonists, the world of Yeshuvu, an astronomical object part of both Legends and Disney canon. So maybe it's possible that Shmi was born in Chiss Space. And what makes this theory even more interesting is that in a way, Shmi's story mirrors that of Thrawn's. Just like Thrawn was the only Chiss, the only alien accepted in the high ranks of Palpatine's empire, Shmi might have been one of the only humans ever hired by the Ascendancy as part of the Skywalker program. But believe it or not, that isn't the only bit of evidence that we have. In the very same Thrawn trilogy, when Thrawn meets Anakin for the first time, he is stunned when he learns his family name. It's noted that when Thrawn hears the name Skywalker, he's immediately reminded of all of the Skywalkers he met growing up, the most notable one being his older sister, who was taken at the age of 5 to become a Skywalker herself. And Thrawn wonders why a human has the name. But here's the juicy bit. Here's the moment you've been waiting for. Timothy Zahn was recently asked about this. He was asked in 2020 as well, and his response is that the name is indeed a nod to Anakin, but he clarifies that originally it wasn't supposed to be a big deal. He never intended the Skywalker core to be a major part of Chiss society. However, the name stuck. He doesn't really elaborate on if that's where the name came from, and I don't think it's his place to do so, but it's a pretty cool theory. I think, in his heart of hearts, that might have become part of his headcanon. In some way, shape or form, even by accident, that might have been the connection he was trying to convey. And maybe Shmi didn't have a last name up until that point. Maybe working for the Chiss is what gave her a sense of identity, and she held on to it. Shmi Skywalker. And you know, the idea of Shmi being Force-sensitive has been prevalent in canon for over 2 decades. We know Anakin was born as a result of the Force responding to Plagueis' experiments. It was essentially the Force pushing back against the Sith. But I would say it's very likely that Shmi herself, even though she downplays it in The Phantom Menace, was Force-sensitive. Maybe when she was younger and working with the Chiss, her third sight was much stronger. But regardless of how you want to interpret this, it is a fact that humans having the Skywalker name is pretty uncommon in the Star Wars universe. Even if Anakin and Luke are the protagonists of the Skywalker saga, they really are an anomaly, to the point where Thrawn was pretty fascinated by the fact. It took him aback. He was wondering why a human possessed a name that was part of his own culture back home. But I was doing a bit of research into Shmi, and I noticed that there's only one place where it's implied that she does have the Force. It's no longer canon, but it's part of the Episode 1 visual dictionary, and it stated that Shmi could sense Anakin when he was nearby, even if she couldn't hear or see him. But we have no official answers. Nonetheless, Timothy Zahn's recent explanations do give us a valuable connection between the Chiss and the Skywalker name. What do you guys think? Do you think this theory is plausible? What are your thoughts? Share them in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and may the Force be with you, always.